Welcome to episode 43 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want, and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. This episode is brought to you almost entirely by Frico, who I will be talking more about towards the end of the episode, but with that said, let's get going. So we're going to start our depressing little adventure in the main menu. Now you would think that there wouldn't be all that much to find in the main menu, but you'd be wrong. First thing that we're going to be taking a look at here is a close-up of Ellie's switchblade, which is not all that exciting, but you always got to save the best for last, so let's take ourselves outside the window. And what do we find out here? Well, we can find ourselves a bird and a city backdrop. Now this is the city backdrop for Pittsburgh, resampled here for the main menu. And if we look at the other side of the wall and start to zoom ourselves out, we can find a black disc. Not entirely sure what this was used for, but I present to you to speculate. You always got to appreciate pre-disaster scenery. But one thing that none of us can appreciate, especially in areas like this, is a restriction on the camera. So if we take the camera outside the house, are we going to find Joel anywhere before he goes inside? And as a matter of fact, yes you do. Look at that baby-faced young Joel. Now the reason for this is that game developers oftentimes preload video game models into the scene before the cutscene starts, or before they're meant to arrive in a cutscene. So in The Last of Us, before we even trigger the cutscene, we can find Joel here on the side of the house. And funny enough, you can actually find Tommy. You remember Tommy, right? Also hiding outside the house before he shows up in his SUV. And here's a nice little zoom out of the hometown. One of the things you can see here is the cityscape, and you can see how it was pulled off. In this particular case, it was a texture. No low poly models like in Dark Souls for The Last of Us, which is quite alright when you consider the fact that this one area for the prologue of the game is pretty expansive. The developers essentially gave us an entire neighborhood to work with, and I'm not complaining.
No cell phone, no radio. Yeah, we're doing great.
Here in this scene, you can see the neighbors trying to pack their stuff, but if we take a closer look at what's going on, it doesn't look like they're very well prepared. Pro tip when trying to survive a disaster, if you have nothing to pack, you might as well skip that step. Really awesome here too, if you watch the entire animation, you can actually see the mocap actor move back into a T-pose. So the next attraction on Mr. Joel's Wild Ride is a burning farmhouse. The question you want to ask, of course, is what does the interior of the farmhouse look like? And if your first answer wasn't a solitary cell in hell, well, I mean, I wouldn't blame you. And now we're getting to the traffic jam, and I don't really have many words for this. This is just really interesting looking. So one of the treats that you'll get is a close-up of the man and the woman, and the man is pretty familiar looking. It's actually the man from the scene earlier ago. And when the two hospital patients come out to attack, we can see that not much is actually happening to the woman inside the car. And as for the traffic jam itself, it almost seemed like it was endless in The Last of Us. But how far does it really go? And as it turns out, it only goes as far as the highway signs. It's times like this I wish I could just pick up my car and just move it to the front of the line. And the last thing that we're going to look at before we finally get out of the prologue is seeing where the crowds come from. Much like the Sonic Adventure 1 episode, they're on a track and they hide behind a corner because that's where they spawn on screen. Okay, so now here's a technical goof that's actually in the player's view, but we're going to take a better look at it. So when maps are made, they're first created with simple untextured block meshes, then replaced with the actual models. But over here, they forgot to make a model for the truck trailers. They were hoping you wouldn't notice because they were so far away, but clearly they're just white blocks. But she says, how do you know it was a truck? Well, that's what I've been told. But seeing is believing, so here's that same area once you reach it in the game, and it's clearly a truck. Hey, when we zoom it out, we can see old Boston. There's the old State House right there, which is supposed to be across from the Commons. And I bet you're wondering if this is an accurate roadmap to the city of Boston. And I'll tell you, it's not that accurate. But if you look it up on Google Maps, I think it is loosely inspired by it. So here's a cutscene where Joel is leaving the subway. And The Last of Us has a lot of areas that are just playgrounds for cutscenes. You're not really meant to explore them as the player. But what's cool in this instance is that if we move the camera freely before the cutscene triggers, you can actually see the entire area that this cutscene plays out in. And this area in particular is a great example of minimalism at its finest. You can see that a lot of the bushes and buildings have either simple geometry or just a texture in general. Essentially, if it's not going to be picked up by a camera angle in that cutscene, it's not going to exist. There's no reason for it to exist. And the way that the developers managed to avoid exhausting all this extra effort is that they knew that their characters are going to be right outside of the subway exit. And from there, they tailored the environment to that position. And once they got all the cinematic cutscenes that they wanted out of the scene, they were done.
We know you're in there. Drop your weapons and come out with your hands up.
Riveting. Emotional. Except for the fact that Tess is already dead the second that you're outside the door. Now, in the game, they want you to think that as soon as you're running around the building, you hear Tess firing off some gunshots and she dies in a gunfight, essentially. But right after this cutscene is over, you can see her dead corpse right there on the floor. She didn't really put up much of a fight at all. She just kind of dropped. So,
She took out 2 of my men.
yeah, either that or your 2 men just dropped to the floor themselves.
You, take out the door. You, with me.
Yes, sir.
So here's a QuickTime event scene that we'll look at in 3 different angles. Now you'll notice that the magic camera angles look a little bit weird in this scene. It's because we actually had to fight with the camera in this particular case. Unfortunately, had we just left it alone, it would have just started rotating on its own. And so the shakiness is essentially us trying to fight with that and make a stable angle. But one of the things that's most interesting about this scene is that you can actually see a full animation of Ellie running up and shooting the guy in the head. Now that's something that happens off camera completely. You're not allowed to see that as the player.
Aw, those monkeys?
Another viewer request was to see the monkeys at the university. Normally you can't get a great look at these monkeys because they run away essentially as soon as you get close to them. So what you're seeing right now is a rare up-close look. Anyways, let's do a zoom out of the university. No matter how many times I do this, it always comes as a surprise to me just how much is loaded into a map at any given time in most of these games. And also if we zoom into this far corner over here, you can see the science building that you visit later in the game in a low polygonal model version.
This place is not creepy at all.
Oh dear, I think it's dead. Well, it's best to buck up and carry on, though. Now we're going to explore the winter map because you guys requested on Twitter, and I love you. What can I say? I'm a crowd pleaser. So if we zoom the map out, we can see the 3 points that you visit in the winter map, which is beautifully described here by Freako. Thanks, man. But outside of that, let's zoom out and move on. Ah, here comes the money shot. So many people were asking about these freaking giraffes, you have no idea. I mean, they're not even half as exciting as birds, but this is what you all asked for, so here you go. And actually what you can see here is the ending path for these giraffes, because after a certain amount of time they just stop walking, because they're off of the player's field of vision anyway. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Why would I ever want to edit out a giraffe eating some leaves up close? Great stuff. Okay, there's only so much melancholy giraffe walking I can take. I'm gonna have to fast forward just a little bit so you can check out the technical aspect of the game. Alright, now we're finally checking out some birds. This particular bird is a seagull, a very popular bird in video game worlds. And here's a nice, beautiful close-up of said seagull in The Last of Us. I'll tell you something, it's a lot better detailed than it was in Mario Kart 64. We've come a very long way in bird modeling technology. Over the hill and past the babbling brook is Tommy's settlement. This is one of those clips where there's a lot to look at, but not a lot to say. It's really all about just exploring this area that you've never been to before. But I think if we try hard enough, we can find a couple of things to talk about here. Yeah, maybe one. For example, the ground is solid. That's right, despite the fact that you were never supposed to walk in this particular area, you're actually able to walk freely, and people stop walking in front of you. Here in this particular scene, we're going to be taking a look at it because you can actually see where the runners spawn. If we take ourselves outside of the hallway area and a little bit past the planks where they drop down from, you can actually see the room where they spawn from. Here we got ourselves an interesting little scene where Joel is helping Ellie up out of an elevator shaft. But then all of a sudden, the elevator shaft breaks And Joel falls. But looking at the scene from a different angle is genuinely disturbing.
Joel? Joel!
I'm alright!
You scared the shit out of me!
Yeah, right back at you, kiddo. Alright, so now we want to know what happens to who I affectionately call the Plank Boys after they go through the window. And as you can see, these are another 2 actors that were asked to move into a T-pose before ending the animation. And you can see them moving into that T-pose if you look at them off screen. So what we're looking at here is the university, and what's particularly odd about this area is that there's objects on the outside of the walls. Things you can find here are clipboards and cabinet shelves. Very strange. As well as window shades and pillars. There's all sorts of junk out here. I'm not entirely sure why that ended up happening. Another popular Twitter request is the hospital scene. Was there anything interesting to find? Well, there was one thing that I thought was kind of cool, and that is that to save on time, Joel actually warps to that door that shows up at the end of the cutscene. But did you happen to notice something a little bit interesting about that room? Yeah, it's an identical surgery room to the one that we were just in. Only this one leads out to a hallway that is more convenient for the developers, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes developers make strange decisions, but you know, whatever. It's a neat little find either way, right? So here in the Left Behind DLC, you have Joel behind a shutter waiting to be rescued, and if you actually go in there, you can actually see that he's a partial model, which is actually pretty hilarious. Kind of reminds me of Judge Doom after he gets squished in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But anyways, I want to take this time to thank Frico, who provided all the footage for this episode. But not only that, he also managed to get the Boundary Break t-shirt on Joel, which was really surprising to me because it's a PS3 game. And he also helped make the thumbnail for this episode. He essentially did half of the episode, and I feel so bad that I couldn't pay him. I'm not a rich man. And as it turns out, he can actually do Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3. And even though we didn't ask for payment, I think it'd be awesome if we could put something together so that we can essentially fund him to work on these 2 episodes. I set up a GoFundMe that you can find in the upper right and the video description down below, if you're interested. If not, I'll figure something out. Alright guys, that was The Last of Us, the very first PlayStation 3 exclusive game on Boundary Break.
I guess you could say it's the first for us.
Yeah,
That's painful, I'm sorry.
That was alright. I really want to thank Frico for helping me do this episode. I already explained it a second ago, but thank you again so much, Frico, for making this episode possible. Xenoblade should be next week. The reason why we went with The Last of Us this week is because the circumstances were really special, and I didn't want to keep Frico waiting after he just put in so much work to help out the show. So, next week will be Xenoblade Chronicles.
Waiting for Derek.
Win for Pat, because that's like one of his favorite games, so.
Yes!
I heard that some people are getting unsubbed. Thanks, YouTube. So if you missed an episode, it could be in the playlist.
It might be in that box.
That's right.
It could even be a boat.
Alright, take care, guys.
Adios, Internet!
Bye.